You know, when you've been an intergalactic bounty hunter as long as I have, there are certain things you never forget. The first is to never invest your money in 7mm ballpoint pens. The ink coagulates too much on the tip and it makes a mess on your bounty claim checks, and the men who are responsible for filing that paperwork and getting you paid are Yakoli bureaucrats, and let me tell you something, those jagoffs are freakish about their neatness. No sir, minimum 5mm ballpoint. You'll thank me later. Other truths are that there's no such thing as too many bathroom breaks, you can never pay too much for proper boot insoles, but the most important thing is that sometimes it's just good to be friends with a mummy. About a few years back, I was tracking down a skip trace by the name of Zafor Wakola. This man was the most notorious dealer of stolen black market soup. Now, I get that you Earth people can't fathom the idea of soup being stolen at an illegal marketplace, but in Sector Sigma, illegal soup sales make up for about 36.2% of all illegal contraband sales. It's second only to pirated DVD copies of The Nanny. The Holy Church of the Dreshertons use these DVDs as marketing for their cult when they're passing out pamphlets on space stations, but that's a different story altogether. But I was having a hard time trying to find this soup-stealing bastard. He was as slick as he was slimy. And after a few days of turning over leads that went absolutely nowhere, I took a break by reaching out to my buddy Hidan for a friendly game of virtual chess with dice. It's kind of like chess, except with dice, and you can actually buy back captured pieces with personal checks for 62 cents American. It's a lot faster and way more efficient than a regular game that those Ruskies play. So here I am, cutting a check for $2.48 when I start telling Hidan about my latest case, and then suddenly the cockpit went dark because Hidan knew the purple-skinned bastard. He also had control over my light systems. I've been meaning to ask him about that, but I never got around to it. You see, Hidan is your everyday mummy. He likes simple things. Pickled duck, Brendan Fraser movies, but the one thing he loves is the annual gathering of mummies. It's this pyramid convention where all of the mummies get together to hang out and discuss future mummy prospects. And all of the mummies are there. King Tut, Cleopatra, that one dude who got accidentally mummified as a college prank that went terribly wrong. The theme this year was supposed to be soup and pinball, and these mummies had the pinball, and all they needed was the soup. And brother, did Hidan have the soup. It's a secret recipe that's been handed down by pharaohs for tens of thousands of years. Now, Hidan's a cool dude, and he doesn't make this soup for just about anybody. So when he handed me a bowl of his trademarked Egyptian surprise, it was so good, I almost saw the intergalactic space god Limprulaperb all hail. That's no joke. And this rat bastard stole the whole lot before the mummy convention, which was more than enough to turn this bounty hunting venture into a straight up personal quest for payback. We saved our game of chess with dice for a later date, and I made a beeline to planet Earth to pick up Hidan and Ampu. Now, he could have met me in a flying space pyramid, but there was no way I was gonna make that dude pay for his own intergalactic space fuel. He had already been through enough. So here we are making a beeline for Sector Sigma with the sweet smell of revenge in the air. And there was only one place where we could find the intel we needed to bring in Zafor Wakola, and it was the Great Soup Market of Doom. Now let me tell you something about this place. This was an open-air market that was as deadly as it was savory. Tens of thousands of illegal soup vendors from all walks of life. Soup dealers, bullion-based pirates, and broth hijackers were peddling their wares from all over the universe. Now, we knew we weren't gonna find Hidan's soup in a place like this. It was far too hot, both in a literal and metaphorical context. No, we were looking for the best thing. Hidan, with fire in his eyes, went to the first illegal chowdermonger and drop-kicked him in the throat. And Ampu went to the soup vendor's cart, lifted his hind leg, and just stared at the man with such intensity that it would make most meth-head bikers weep in terror. Hidan didn't even need to say a word. He just stared this guy down. And I was all like, don't look at me, brother. I'm not the one who stole this dude's soup. And he spilled the beans. They always do. And we got ourselves a lead. And it turns out Hidan's Egyptian surprise was so popular that it was no way it was going to be sold to just any random illegal soup slurper. No, this was something bigger. Now, it was supposed to be a myth, but apparently every quarter century, the biggest crime bosses get together for a massive auction of all sorts of illegal goods. You name it. Particle blasters, drugs, Scott Baio merchandise. But the crowning achievement this year was none other than the Egyptian surprise. Now, we would be damned if we were going to let Hidan's magical broth elixir go into the hands of some green-scaled so-called Vito Corleone wannabe. Now, there was no way we were getting into this special event without the password, and there was no possible way we could find it. So, naturally, I just guessed. And naturally, the password was password. And it was a criminal scum bonanza. And it would have been a bounty hunter's wet dream if I was actually dumb enough to go after the top tier black market soup marketeers, but no way, dude. I take my spleen the same way I take my vintage movie posters, intact and at room temperature. No, there was only one target that I was interested in, and Hidan was ready to summon the wrath of Anubis on the entire planet and just level it to dust. Normally, I would agree with them, but doing so would have required a massive amount of paperwork, and I was all out of popcorn anyway, so that plan was scrapped. We decided on a better plan. We just strolled right in as if we owned the place, just an intergalactic space badass and a hardcore 4,000-year-old mummy with stolen soup on the mind. And in a stroke of blind luck, it turns out Zaphor Wakola was just standing there on stage with a cauldron full of Hidan's soup. So without question, I drew my particle blasters, pointed them at Zarkor Wakola, and accused that bastard of being a jerk. Now, you gotta understand something. In intergalactic space crime circles, calling a guy a jerk was no laughing matter. That was like accusing a video store clerk of hiding the new release movies for himself instead of renting them out to the general public. You don't do it without proof. And if Hidan wasn't there backing me up, I'd be floating in the vacuum of space with the space fishes of Delta Minotaurus. And I said the only thing I could come to mind, and that was nobody steals Hidan's soup. Now, one of the crime bosses, a Froglodyte who talks just like Billy Zane, oddly enough, was appalled at the accusation because Zaphor Wakola told all of the crime families that Hidan lent him the soup in exchange for borrowing a dehumidifier. And Hidan just walked right in and said he had no need for a dehumidifier because he lived in the friggin' desert. Now, all the crime bosses are all sorts of pissed off, right? Because if there's one thing you don't do in this universe, is steal Hidan's soup. And they were planning on boiling Zaphor Wakola in some broth in an effort to make some kind of an apology to the most famous mummy in the known universe, but we both insisted that he got turned over to me. After all, I could have used the extra 435 space bucks. So for the trouble, they pulled down his pants and returned the soup, and we all laughed it off as a funny story. And as I dropped off Hidan for his mummy convention, he gave me a free bowl of Egyptian surprise as a token of friendship and brotherhood. To this day, whenever I have the honor of sharing a bowl of that soup, the only way to describe the flavor is that it tastes like justice. And onions, but mostly justice.